So a couple of videos back, we were having a conversation about how there's a type of infighting in the fighting game community where people are trying to basically push their games onto other people because the overall pool of people that would be interested in playing a fighting game competitively is relatively small, and we're all kind of competing for the attention of that same user base, right? But one angle that I didn't really discuss in that video is that one of the reasons that those conversations can last so long into a game's lifespan is because of this notion of like a forever game, right? And this is a term that I made up. Maybe it exists somewhere else. I don't know. But what is a forever game? A forever game is a game, a competitive game in this instance, that is going to be played basically for the foreseeable future because it happens to basically be a snapshot of like the value systems and what people really loved about a game series in a certain period of time, right? So a great example of this is a game like Super Smash Bros. Melee, right? When you talk to somebody who really likes Super Smash Bros. Melee, they'll talk to you, sure, about like, you know, oh, it's an aggressive game, it's really fast, I like the wave dashing, I like all of this sort of stuff. But they'll also talk to you about even more like esoteric things. So they'll talk to you about like the weight of the characters, the way that the sound effects are, the way that the stages look, or the light engine is, or, you know, just like little things about the game that just happen to make it feel right. You know, just things that are, like I said, almost ephemeral, like the weightiness of the characters or something that you almost can't like put into words properly. Another forever game in my mind is Street Fighter Third Strike. So I think to a slightly lesser degree than Melee is, because depending on who you are and who you ask, you could argue that Melee is like the definitive Smash Brothers game and that it's like the most popular one. If you're ignoring like a regular person's opinion, if we're just talking about like esports, right? Because to a regular person, Smash Ultimate is the Super Smash Brothers game, right? But Street Fighter Third Strike, if you go to like a fighting game tournament, it's not necessarily guaranteed to be there, and it's not guaranteed to have a large number of entrants in the same way that Melee is if you go to like a platform fighting centric event, right? But Third Strike, again, still speaks to a window of time in a type of fighting game player and what they really liked about Street Fighter at that time. You know, there aren't these sort of overpowering, forward advancing, you know, armored sort of system mechanics that exist in Third Strike. All there really is your character, the parry system, and a couple of like softer system mechanics, like again the universal overhead, your ability to select supers, that sort of stuff. I think there's a guard meter and a stun meter and all that sort of stuff. So all of those sorts of things that come together. And again, like Melee, some of the more ephemeral and like less tangible qualities as well. Things like the UI, the announcer, the music, all of these sorts of things. The character designs, I think, also in Third Strike are super unique. All of those qualities sort of come together to make a game that people are willing to play and push despite the fact that it's not going to get a patch anymore, right? So I was thinking about this the other day and I was like, what is this next forever game going to be? Or maybe the question instead was like, if I could control what the next forever game would be, then what would it be? And the answer that I came to for fighting games is probably BlazBlue Central Fiction. Now hear me out. I came to this thought pretty recently, as I want to say it was like 3 weeks to a month ago now at this point. I just grinded BlazBlue for like a week and sort of fell back in love with the game. I've been playing it off and on since then again. And it was kind of surprising to me because back when BlazBlue was relatively fresh and each new iteration was coming out, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. Mostly, I think, because I was still a scrub. I don't know another way to put that. I think BlazBlue and all of its different system mechanics just kind of flew over my head. And a couple of little things really irritated me about the game when I was playing it and I was younger. Things like when you would wake up and you would roll to the left or right, you could be like hit or thrown out of that animation. And that was entirely new to me because from every other game that I've played, you know, we were just talking about Super Smash Bros. Melee. When you tech roll to the left or right, you're still technically invincible. You're just changing where you're standing up and what your get-up timing was. So I never really liked that. There are a couple of other system mechanics about BlazBlue, and I think the characters can be so eccentric and so weird that you'll look at somebody that you like the aesthetic of, and you're like, they seem really cool. And then if you like pick them up and you're a relatively newer player to fighting games as a whole, you're like, I have no fucking idea how to control this guy. You're like, I'll play Hazama. He's wearing a fedora. I'm a Reddit moderator. And then you pick him up and he's like this weird, like, he's got like a dash instead of a run. And he's got like this chain that he's got to swing on. He's got like a bunch of different ways that he can swing on. And then Sometimes if they counter hit, they have a ton of hits done, but if they don't counter hit, they don't have it. There's a lot going on, right? Potential, just potential. But yeah, after revisiting it, I think my perspective shifted. And if I had to assign a single game to that forever anime fighter slot, it would probably be BlazBlue Central Fiction. The first question that comes up, I think, is why not Guilty Gear? Guilty Gear has had a little bit more staying power. It's obviously the IP that Arc System Works likes to push, and it's the one that they've maintained and are trying to keep healthy. I think if you wanted to proposition Guilty Gear for that slot, then I think you have to have a conversation about which one, which immediately gets a little bit muddy. We could say that Guilty Gear Strive goes into that quintessential anime fighter slot because it's the most popular that Guilty Gear has ever been. But it's also the most different that Guilty Gear has ever been. It's very different from either Plus R or Xrd before it, and also very different from like other anime fighters in terms of its overall feel as a game. I'm not saying bad, although never mind. The other two games, Plus R and Xrd, are relatively similar to one another, which ironically is a problem in a different way, because then the conversation becomes which one do you pick? I think people that really like Plus R and were around and playing it heavily during that time would disagree with me, because I remember there were so many people like, oh, YRC just changes Guilty Gear so fundamentally, all these, you know, the big counter hits and what was that system called? I'm drawing a blank. But the one where like your attacks clash and then you go into the super fucked up Danger Time, that's what it was. Funny ass mechanic. And anyway, Plus R people would tell you that Xrd was very, very different from Plus, and they're right. But in the grand scheme of things now, looking back, Strive is very different from either Xrd or Plus R. If you were trying to decide, you know, whether you want to put Xrd or Plus R in that slot, then the conversation is, you know, do you value some of the ease of inputs and the access that Xrd gives you? Because it didn't make it easier, but it did make things like YRC available as opposed to like much harder, you know, run and cancel timing. Or do you want to put up Plus R because, you know, it's much stricter. I guess it's easier to run. Not that I think that really matters anymore. I feel like a lot of this conversation between these two games would ultimately come down to which game has the character that you like in it. If you play Bedman, you're going to put up Xrd. If you play if you play like Zappa, then you're going to want, you know, your Plus R or whatever. So yeah, I think it becomes really difficult to say which Guilty Gear you would put up at that point. By comparison, BlazBlue Central Fiction is kind of the culmination of everything that BlazBlue has ever been, right? So every character that has ever been released for BlazBlue is in BlazBlue Central Fiction. There's no, I have to go back to CS to be able to play the character that I actually want to play. Every BlazBlue character that has ever been playable is playable in BlazBlue Central Fiction. And that gives it a much larger roster than any of the Guilty Gear games that we previously mentioned as well. Maybe, you know, for BlazBlue, you might miss like your character having a certain tool or like having certain interactions or the way that they used to be stronger in a previous patch than they are in this patch. Sure, totally valid. But there isn't the same like incentive to argue that we should go back as there is in other games, because when you go back in BlazBlue, sure, maybe your character is balanced a little bit differently, but you take away a bunch of other people's characters for no given reason. And Central Fiction, I think, is already like such a solid game that argument just doesn't need to exist. So that gives Central Fiction like a lot of stability in that there's not like its own BlazBlue community infighting about like which specific BlazBlue they should be playing, right? I think that's really nice. I think another thing is that if we wanted to proposition a single game to kind of be like a stand-in for all of anime fighters, I think BlazBlue has like a suite of system mechanics that are pretty representative of that end, right? So it's got like your barrier so that you can sort of push block people away and also reduce chip damage. It's got your burst, that's super typical. It's got your, you know, double jump and or dash sort of stuff, that's all super typical. It's got your rainbow magic series, that's all super typical. It's got a drive button, which is not typical, but is super, like, I'm trying to think of what the word is. Maybe accessible? Like, the way that we use accessible in the gaming community right now is something particularly easy to do for somebody who either hasn't practiced the execution or even potentially is, like, disabled, right? That's not necessarily what I'm talking about here. When I say accessible, I mean, like, you boot up BlazBlue and you pick a character and you push the drive button and you immediately see, like, the cool identifiable thing that they do. You know, in some regard, right? Like you pick Rachel, you push the D button, you're immediately like pushing Gus of Wind across the map, and you're like, that's really cool, right? Like, it's accessible in that way. You just push the button, and then like a cool thing happens, and I think that's really nice. From like a product perspective, the game is fairly whole, right? It's got, you know, a campaign mode. I honestly haven't done it. I know that the story of BlazBlue is fucked, and I just haven't ever tried. So the characters are cool independently. I don't really need to know the context that they live in personally. But it's got a campaign mode if you're interested in that. It's got, you know, your challenge mode with different tiers of challenges, which I've always really liked. They do this in some of the French bread games as well, and I think it's a good way of teaching people, even if they're like inoptimal combos in the long run, just teaching people gradually, you know, combos at their level, right? Talking at their level, I think is really good. The online functionality is also pretty solid. It's got rollback netcode on PC. I'm remembering now that I don't think the rollback patch ever came to console, and that is kind of a problem. But I suppose it's not a problem that the Melee community also doesn't have, or the Third Strike community also doesn't have. They're not really playing those games on consoles either, so yeah, is what it is. But yeah, like the online functionality, your ability to view replays and all that sort of stuff, it's all quite nice. It's not like the craziest fighting game package you've ever seen. It's not like, whoa, I'm getting so much value for my money, but it's like, okay, everything that I expect a fighting game to have is here. With the BlazBlue Central Fiction Improvement mod, you also get a couple of other features that are just kind of nice. Your ability to make your own palettes for your characters and or download palettes of other players. And also, I think, like, extended range on matchmaking to be able to, you know, find more consistent matches and all of that sort of stuff. So I think BlazBlue has everything that it would need to be that sort of forever game and be that sort of stand-in for anime fighters in this hypothetical that I've made up where we need one. Right. Ultimately, again, this is the FGC because we all like different games. So this isn't like a proposition that you should drop whatever you're playing to go play BlazBlue. But it is my vouching to give BlazBlue a shot if you aren't already, you know, like playing it or haven't given it a shot. Or haven't given it a shot in a while even. Like I said, I was not a fan even a few years ago. But I am such a stronger player than I was like 7-8 years ago that the game is much more enjoyable for me now. And there is just a lot to like and a lot to appreciate about the game. And that was the big FGC portion of this video, but if you would be so kind, I would like to publicly mourn a second game here. This is Battlerite, and outside of like a core FGC title, this would be my second nomination for a forever game. This game is dead as hell. It's got like 50 players, and I'm pretty sure they're all French. So I don't get to play this game at all. But when I used to play this game back in like college and stuff, I was fucking nasty. So what is Battlerite? It is an isometric 3v3 arena game with heroes. This hero here is my favorite hero in the game. Her name is Freya. So in Battlerite, again, it's a 3v3 game, so R3 would spawn over here, the other 3 would spawn on the other side of the map, and the objective is, it's a round-based game. You kill the other 3 people on the enemy team, and then the round ends, and you go to the next round, and then you try to do it again. And the first team to win 3 rounds wins the game, right? Each hero has like a bunch of different abilities. So my left click is just a basic attack. I swing it, and you see it's got, in this case for Freya, it's got a series of three swings. So I do 1, 2, 3, and you notice that the first 2 swings do 10 damage, and then that last swing does 14 damage, right? So that's just the way that Freya's left click works. And in Battlerite, you do have to aim everything. So I can't just go up to this guy and left click. I have to actually aim my reticle over towards him and properly hit him. Right click is a hammer throw. So I throw a hammer, it does a little bit of damage, and it applies that static debuff that we will return to later. Another really nice thing about Battlerite that we can talk about here is some of its universal system mechanics. So I can cancel basically any move as it's starting to come out. I got to throw my hammer, and then no, I don't. Right? You can cancel your actions by pushing C before they come out, and I don't know if I can cancel that one because it came out immediately. Maybe it's not everything, but definitely a bunch of the actions that you have, you're able to cancel. Let's see, can't cancel that, but I can cancel the hammer throw. There are also a bunch of universal like types of tools that every character is going to have on specific buttons, right? So your space is usually like a getaway tool or like an engagement tool. It's some sort of movement ability, right? In the instances where it's not a movement ability, sometimes it's like an invisibility and speed buff, so it, like, you know, you're able to get away in that way, or, you know, stuff like that. Your Q is almost always a parry or a counter or some sort of system like that. In Freya's instance, she does this. It has a counter window. Anybody who hits her during that window is applied the static debuff, pulled towards her, and each hit, I think it's just a facet or a Battlerite that gives me this, but yeah, you can make it like give you shields and stuff. Maybe it just gives you a shield in general. I don't recall. The E is a like AoE around her. She jumps up, she hits everybody around her. It also applies the static debuff. There are two really good things to know about this ability, and also like a system mechanic type thing about this ability. One is that when she jumps up, you notice that her health bar disappears, and that's because she is invulnerable when she jumps into the air. So that means if somebody was shooting a projectile at me and my space happened to be on cooldown, I could use E to generate an iframe and, go over it. This is maybe an instance where my space and my Q are both off cooldown, because if it was just a projectile, I would normally like Q it and then counter it and pull them towards me and generate a shield and all that good stuff. The other thing is like a system mechanic thing. We've talked about how Q is like this sort of nearly universal parry counter type system. Well, you can't parry or counter moves that are circular for whatever reason. It's just a system mechanic. That's the way that it works. So when I go up to pressure somebody and they're expecting that I'm going to like left click on them or something, and they go to counter, if I do my E, I'm able to burn a cooldown to securely do damage with an iframe that cannot be countered. So if they happen to push Q and I'm pushing E, then I do that first bit of damage. I see that they're countering and I'm like, okay, maybe I do like a hammer throw and then I cancel it because I'm like, okay, they're countering. Let me hold off for a second and then I'll wait for them, and then I'll do, whatever my punish is after they're done with their parry window, right? So that's all very cool. This R here, you'll notice has a little pip below it, right? That's because it costs a bar of meter. Like a fighting game, you'll notice under my health that we have these 4 little bars. And if I push R, then I use one of those pips, or 25%, to use that ability, and then it goes on cooldown. So it's kind of like an EX move. What you might not realize is that you have EX variants of some of your other moves as well. If I hold down Shift, you'll see that my space and my E turn into different moves. So normally my space is just, I jump, I have the spring movement buff, and then I'm able to sort of close a distance on somebody, right? That's pretty cool. The EX space is quite nice because it's all of that same stuff, but when I attack somebody, I put the remnant debuff on them. And, if you have a battle right, you can also make it, let's see, where is it? Spring causes your next bash to grant you a shield, yeah. So I always keep forgetting like what part of my hero is from battle rights and what part of the hero is just baseline, but yeah. So another thing is, the E. It changes my E from this like hopping iframe circular, punish type move to being aligned like ground slam, like a skill shot, right? So you're able to do this, and it also puts the static remnant on them. So we should probably talk about what the static remnant actually is. The static debuff that you apply to people is consumed and then turned into like an additional effect depending on the move that is consuming it, right? So for example, if I were to use E to apply this debuff and then use right click, I could push him into the wall and incapacitate him. So that's just what using the right mouse button on somebody who already has a static remnant on it does. It pushes them back, and if they make contact with a wall or another surface, then they will become incapacitated for a short little while. If I was to do it in the opposite order, right? So I hit him with an R and then I hit E, then my E does bonus damage, and also I think doesn't consume the debuff, because that's just what E does. If you use E on somebody who already has a static remnant, then you or more damage with them. If I were to do E and then R, then my R would consume the static remnant, and it would generate additional shield for me for everybody with static that was hit in the little cone that I did there. So this character is very like flowy, very combo-y, very trying to use your iframes and your parry to mitigate as much damage as possible, and also generate a bunch of shields for yourself so that you can stay in the fight, but also trying to sequence your moves and trying to see what things are up and off cooldown, so that A, you're able to protect yourself, but B, you're also able to get into advantageous positions on opponents and pin them to walls and set up combos and all that sort of stuff. Notice that there's also stuff to collect on the map, but really this is all just like resources. If you are hurt and your healer is dead, or you just otherwise need to get a little bit of healing, walk over here and get some of these green orbs. If you wanted to generate some meter, then you just collect these orange orbs and they give you some of that. This orb in the middle is very, very important. It's, I guess, like the most important objective in the game, because it fills up, it spawns the orb, and then whichever team breaks it or gets the last hit on it, they get a significant amount of meter, and then that could potentially be the difference between your team having 3 ultimates and their team not having 3 ultimates, or what have you. Freya's ultimate, by the way, is pretty good. Another big ass iframe that Does AoE, circular, uncounterable damage, and also applies static. Very cool, very nice, really good. But it's super telegraphed, so you can potentially get out of it if you are good. So why this lecture on Freya? Why did we do all this? Hold on, let me pause while I think about that. I think I'm doing all of this to try to illustrate to you guys that Battlerite was a fighting game. It was just an isometric 3v3 fighting game. It required a lot of executional prowess in terms of being able to hit all of your skill shots, because everything in this game is a skill shot. It required intelligent sequencing of all of your moves to be able to get these combos, and to be able to also like align with what your teammates are doing and play off of their abilities and all of that sorts of stuff. And in general, I think it's just a shame that this game is A, gone, and B, that there isn't another game like it. We've gotten some stuff like Supervive and I guess a couple of other titles that I'm drawing a blank on. But a lot of them, they just don't come with the full package, right? This game is so good and so precise. I love being able to feint my moves. I love that every character has a universal counter. I love that every character has universal movement options. I love that we have both, like, not that many abilities. We've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Technically, like 6 abilities if you don't count the auto attack. But you're able to get like a little bit more pull and weight out of them by just having this EX system that is pretty intuitive to anybody who's played fighting games before. It's so sick. This game is so good. And the roster of characters is unbelievable. We've got, let's see here. Let's just talk about these guys for a little bit. Super cool. He's like this stealth assassin type guy. His spacebar, he can jump twice, and each time he does like a cleave when he comes down. He can apply poison and a circular AoE, so he can't be countered. And he also goes entirely invisible and can stun people out of stealth. And some people, they get distracted by his look. He's like, a frog with these 2 daggers, and he's this poisonous assassin type character, right? So they think that they just go in and they burst somebody down and then they kill him, right? But really, this guy's just super tricky. He jumps in, he stabs you a couple of times, he stuns you, he puts poison on you, okay, he gets out. And then you're like, where the fuck did he go? And he comes back, he does another nuke on you, he drops some poison on you, he disengages again. Super cool, super fun. More characters that are worth talking about. I mean, they're all worth talking about, but I'm not going to talk about everybody. Shifu, he, again, has this spear. Not again, this is my first time talking about him. He's got a spear. He used to be called Spearmaster back in Bloodline Champions. He is this super aggressive sort of rushdown style character. His space doesn't come with a jump or a burst of movement in that way. Instead, it gives him a general movement speed buff and also makes him literally intangible for a couple of seconds. Meaning that he can run at you and swing at you without you being able to interact with him for a couple of seconds. It's really fucked. He has a bunch of ways to stay on top of you by either throwing a spear that has a tether so that he can pull himself towards you, being able to, he's got a Q that I think teleports him to you if you happen to hit him during it. Really, really cool. Just a super cool, aggressive, in your face, running at you type of character. Jumong. I really like Jumong. This is one of my favorite characters. He was kind of tough because he would shoot his left click auto attacks at you, and then if he hit the enemies up to 3 times, then he would get a charge of let me try to remember how this character worked, to be honest, because I'm pretty sure it lets you cast it again, right? It's been a little while. Unfortunately, it's so difficult to play this game anymore. So yeah, we're Jumong. So we shoot something, you see it puts that little 1 next to us, 2, 3, and then I think I can Q and then recast Q. Yeah, that's how it works. So the same also applies to any of my other abilities. I could 1, 2, 3, cast space again, right? So it lets you double up on any of the abilities that you have. But this guy, super mobile. You've got an E, which snares anybody that happens to come in contact with it. Your space allows you to shoot while also retreating in a direction. Your rain of arrows is a slow that also controls an amount of area. You've got just a really reliable left click that does 16 damage, which is really nice. This alt left click that's going to bounce around and I think maybe also heals Juma. And big right click damage. Really, really nice. And the real icing on the cake is, again, once you have all of these stacks, you can just use these abilities back to back, any of them. The right click, the space, the Q, the E, anything that you need. If you need to deny a bunch of space and deal a bunch of damage to it, you can use the rain of arrows. If you need to deny a choke and make sure people don't move through it, you can use double bear trap. If you need to get the fuck out of a situation, you can use double space to get away. Very, very flexible, very, very interesting, but only if you're able to consistently hit those left clicks. If you're not able to hit those left clicks, then you're just fundamentally a weaker character than everybody else. Really, really cool. We also have, let's see, can I just change characters this way? We also have Taya. I like Taya a lot. Taya is pretty cool. Boomerang-based character, again, very, very mobile. She has the ability to do a lot of damage by basically hitting people with the intersection of her right click. So you throw out these boomerangs, and if you target it like right here, you might be able to cleave this guy and this guy, but if you hit somebody with both of them, then you do a bunch of bonus damage. Her space really is just a movement bust. It lasts for a pretty good amount of time, so that's really cool. Your Q, very good. You spin, it knocks everybody away. It's not a parry or a counter per se, but it is still your defensive get the fuck away from me type tool. And I'm pretty sure, no, maybe it's the, okay, it's the EX one. Excuse me. Her EX Q, if you knock people into the wall with it, oh wait, unless I'm chipping, maybe this is a battle, right? Wind Strike inflicts stun to enemies that are knocked into walls, yeah. So again, these battle rides can really fundamentally change the way that a character works, because I thought that was just baseline. Apparently everybody just takes that because it's super good. Your E is, a big thing that you throw and then gives anybody that walks through it haste. And I think it also pulls nearby enemies to the center. Yeah. So it makes it like difficult for enemies to leave it if they get caught in it. What was this one again? Target ally is swept up in the air and becomes unhittable. They are tossed out of the tornado in the direction of their choosing. Okay. So this is almost like a Yules from Dota, where I'm like, oh no, I'm in danger, so I lift myself up and then I get out. Or I guess I could lift an ally and then they could maybe hop over the wall if they needed to. So that's all. I'm like remembering a bunch about these characters as I play through them. It's such a shame that they stopped working on them. Well, I didn't even know that the EX right click was just that singular skill shot. Damn, fucked up. Some of the healers are also really sick. Let's see, who do we want to talk about in here? Pearl we could talk about. My homie was a Pearl main. I played an insignificant amount of her myself. The nice thing about this game is that all of the characters, whether you're a healer, you're a ranged DPS, whatever, you were given the tools to be able to fend for yourself. Technically, if you're really fucking good, you could 1v3, especially with with a character that has a lot of outplay potential like a Freya. She has a bunch of different ways to generate iframes and shields for herself and all of that sort of stuff. But in general, a lot of the characters are strong enough to fend for themselves, right? So you see her staff is currently glowing purple. When I left click somebody and I hit them with my auto attack, it's going to silence them. I believe that comes back on its own, but how does it, if my staff is charged? Okay, so it doesn't say how I charge it. Oh, okay, the EX recharges the staff. Okay, so you start the game with a left click silence, and then after the fact, you have to spin 25 meters back. Okay, got it. Her right click, and most characters' right click in this game is just a heal. So you just target an area, you throw your heal, it heals whoever's in the bubble. One interesting thing about the way that heals and health works in this game is that there is a threshold, right? So let's say I was taking a bunch of damage. Can I actually take a bunch of damage? Maybe I can. This thing should shoot me, right? So we'll lose life, right? See the bars going down. I'm losing life. Okay. Now you'll notice that this shell, how big my health bar can be, is also starting to go down, right? So in this game, when your health is lowered, there is, I think, about 30% where you can be healed again, right? But past this point, you cannot be healed, right? Because you've taken too much damage past this point. So you can only be healed for a certain percentage above the actual health that you have remaining, right? But if I remember correctly, I think taking these, the health orbs give you some health beyond that. And I think if we were to take this, then we get a little bit of health beyond that, right? So there are ways to get some of that life back, that permanent life back, quote unquote. But you can't just spam heal people. You couldn't theoretically pick a team that has 3 healers and then just try to heal through all of the damage. They would just focus one of you and then you'd be able to heal that person up enough, right? Tidal Wave is a counter that's quite good. If I remember correctly, you would hit her and then she would be able to jump somewhere else. And I think, is it that? If you counter an attack, heal yourself for 12 health and send out a tidal wave, it deals 15 damage to nearby enemies and knocks them back. No, it's almost like the Freya one where, or not the Freya one, the Taya one, where she knocks everybody away. You also have Space, which I forgot recharges the staff as well. Nice. So anytime you jump, you have a silence again. That's pretty good. Your E is just an incredible space denial thing. If the opponent were to try to shoot projectiles through this, they would basically get stuck in the bubble and slow way down until you moved out of the way. Your R, I think, is just a shield, and then your other abilities are quite good. But this character is just really, really nice. Again, you can sort of use your silences to pressure people to walk back, and then once they walk back, put bubbles in the area so that they can't fight and contest. Maybe they have to go around. Maybe they have to wait for the bubble to go away. You can shield your allies to deal with some of that permanent life. You have a really reliable heal with a really wide radius on it. Just a good all-around reliable healer. Just really solid. Just good stuff going on there. And on the other side of the coin, you have probably my favorite healer in the game, which is Sirius. So Sirius is this interesting intersection between having like a healer that is able to have like a lot of setup type tools and like a melee assassin. You'll notice on the right side of my character, I have this little green icon, and also my sickle is glowing. That means that my next left click is going to cleave and do a bunch of damage. Yeah. Wait, maybe it doesn't cleave. Maybe it just looks really wide. Goes to show how much I know. Let's wait for it to come back. Oh, no, it doesn't cleave. It's only going to hit one guy, but it weakens him. I think increases the damage we can do to him. Pretty similar heal to Pearl. It's on a longer delay. It takes longer to cast and longer to come down, but it is still decently wide and pretty reliable. Your space, a pretty conventional space. You become invincible and you jump to a location. Your Q is a pretty reliable counter. You fucking get countered and then you jump to another location, right? Counter attack, you teleport to a near location, and then you heal nearby allies for 12 health and fully charge your weapon. Very nice. Okay, I'll just whiff the parry. I'll ignore that. Your E is like a petrify. So it's an AoE. We'll throw it on these targets. It petrifies them, and then if you were to hit them, you would break the petrify, but you would be able to set up a whole bunch of stuff there. So maybe, you know, in a match, you're very rarely going to petrify all three, but if you do, maybe you only wake up the one. Maybe they only got woken up because they took like above a threshold of damage. Is that how it works? I can't remember. Target gains a shield that absorbs up to 20 damage and is unable to move or use abilities for 3 seconds. This effect breaks if the shield breaks. Yeah, so it only breaks if you deal damage. Yeah, it basically breaks if you deal damage, but it's harder to deal damage because it also applies a shield to them. Your R is also a forward advancing nuke. Really, really good. So this character sort of plays back. He heals everybody. If anybody tries to go on him, he can use his Q to retreat and bounce over to another area and sort of heal people. But then every time this buff is off cooldown, you basically want to try to get in there, weaken an opponent with a big cleave, and then maybe step back. Or if you happen to get like a really good petrify, like say we petrify these guys, okay, then we just go on this guy for a second and then we burst him for as hard as possible before these two people come back up, right? So he's like a really good healer that is like an offensive melee setup type character. Really, really cool. But I've ranted about Battlerite for way longer than I actually intended to in this video. I wasn't going to rant about this at all, but then I felt compelled all of a sudden. This game and this format is so incredibly good, and games like Supervive, which is really the only competitor I can think of at the moment, kind of miss in their arena mode like what makes this special. Like part of what makes this special is how interactive it is between, you know, just having a kit, a full kit that is really deep and realized, having a bunch of universal system mechanics between like spaces to evade, parries to be able to deal with some tools but not all of the tools in the game, being able to feint certain attacks and you know pretend that you're going to shoot them without actually having to shoot them out. There's just even the Battlerite system, the ability to, you know, accentuate certain traits of these characters, you know, they just don't really have that sort of stuff, right? We have a bunch of different ways to modify the different abilities and sort of tune this Sirius to be my Sirius as opposed to somebody else's. In a game like Supervive, it kind of feels like it's like a 4v4 and we run at each other, and if somebody shoots and hits you with a skill shot, that's kind of it. There's no like parry or let me use an iframe to evade, or it kind of feels like a League of Legends is of this game where like, I don't know. I just miss Battlerite, I think is what I'm getting at. I just miss this game. There's nothing that's really like it, and it's not really possible to find matches for it anymore. So if I could revive this game, I would. But I'm not yet, so we'll see. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to me ramble. I know it's been a long one. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me. BlazBlue, Battlerite. YouTube usually likes 3s or 5s in their lists, right? So why don't you guys be the third? If you could designate any game to be like a forever game that you know is not going to receive any patches anymore, but you feel is still worth playing and pushing anyway, what would that be? You let me know. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one, all right? Peace.